I recently interviewed Jesse, a former intern at Epic Games, on the Fortnite team, a team I'll be joining in just a few months. So I was really excited to talk to him about what it was like studying game development at Digipen, the internship application process, and then the internship itself. In this interview, which was over an hour, I was able to narrow it down to about 40 minutes of edited content, really focusing on his answers and trying to cut out my questions where possible. With that being said, I have listed time codes in the description of this video, which should allow you to jump between any sections you might be interested in. Finally, at the end of this video, I've included a short video of my takeaways, including everything I learned from this conversation with Jesse, just in case you want the too long didn't watch and just get the cliff notes there. So I'll join you there at the end of the video. Now, if this video is helpful, if these are the kind of things you'd like to see more of, please do consider giving this video a like and consider subscribing so I can make more videos like this. I hope to be having a few more interviews of this nature coming up very soon, so look on the horizon for that. It will be on this channel, and if you subscribe, you'll be the first to know. Thanks.
I always really like math and science, and I love video games. I love playing them, and wanted to turn it into some sort of career. I did a little bit of programming in high school. I took a programming class that I really enjoyed, and a kind of light game development class. And then through research, the name Digipen kept coming up as this really, really well-known, well-respected school. So I went out to visit, was really impressed with what I saw. It was the first school I applied to. I got accepted, and I I decided to go with it right away. Yeah, so my major is computer science in real-time interactive simulation. It's a game development, programming, and C++ major, and it starts out with a focus on graphics and engine development, so game engine development, and then beyond that, there's a lot of freedom to kind of focus on what things you like. But early on, a lot of graphics, a lot of like core engine development, as opposed to just like gameplay or physics or things like that. Every year there, you work on if you choose one of the game development majors, you work on a game project with a team. So you form a team and work on a 1 to 2 to 3 semester long game project. So by the end of your time there, you'll have like 3, 4 like solid game projects under your belt.
What was that experience like, I guess, working on a video game for the first time with a team, and then where did those projects go?
Yeah. So they start you out pretty quick on working on projects and forming teams. So by second semester of my freshman year, we were working on our first like real game project, and it was using a kind of in-house developed learning engine that Digipen used to work on for a while called Zero Engine. I formed a team with 2 of my roommates and this one other friend of ours. There were like 4 of us, and we worked on a little top-down shooter, like kind of like Geometry Wars, where it's like neon colored, like little abstract spaceships shooting other little abstract spaceships. And that was a really interesting project because we made so many, just looking back, just really, really dumb mistakes on that were really good learning processes. Like we started out the project without any source control set up because we're like, oh, it's such a small team, we're such a small group, we'll just work, when we're together we'll work on it and we'll just have one core project. We're like, no, this is a terrible idea. It's like, stop, immediately set up source control. So yeah, that was a big learning step. Also, just working on a group coding project was like new to me. I'd never really worked on. And then after that, I made my first like Unreal project, Unreal Engine 4 project, which was like a 3D game. It was like an 11-person team, so it was just this huge team of like artists and programmers and designers and a sound designer, all working on this really massive project, which was really exciting. And then after that, I kind of focused on things that I really wanted to do, so like more gameplay focused, like small prototypes, focusing on trying to do things for console development, like developing a game for the Switch. Yeah, so unfortunately we didn't get that specific game developed for the Switch, but I feel like we really opened the pathway for teams down the road because we were really on the administration, like, hey, get us dev kits, like we want to do this, like we're gonna do this, and they're like, yeah, hell yeah, we're gonna get you this any way we can. And paperwork and whatever, not it didn't work out that way, but I was able to take a class at Digipen that was a Nintendo Switch development class. So yeah, working on dev kits and porting games from Unity and Unreal and kind of more inline code projects to dev kit and playing around with that. So that was really cool.
What was kind of the path towards figuring out where within programming you fit? What was that path like?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I kind of fancy myself a gameplay programmer at this point. It's what I have the most experience in. It's what my internship was for. It's what my upcoming job is pretty much for. And yeah, the path to get to that point was a pretty like long one. I had no idea what I wanted to do within games besides be a programmer when I got to Digipen, and I didn't have any clear idea until probably my junior year. So, like I said, with this degree, they start you out really heavily on graphics. I was like, oh, this is what this degree is for. I'll try focusing on graphics. Turns out I hate doing graphics. Graphics is very cool, very exciting, awesome tech there, but it's just not for me. Like, not it wasn't meshing with me. So I got really discouraged by that. I was like, oh, is there something wrong with me? Like, I'm not focusing on this thing that they're telling me is really important and cool. So at that point I was like, no, nothing's wrong with me. I'm gonna try other stuff. So I just started trying things. I just started trying different roles, taking on different tasks within these projects, and especially with my junior year game, which was our first like Unreal developed game. I was like, okay, I'm gonna do these things in the game. I'm gonna do gameplay. I'm gonna do some of the UI. I'm going to try these things, and I like worked that out with my team so that I was being productive and doing things for that we needed for the project for my team, but also like a chance to kind of experiment and see like what I liked. And I really, really like meshed and vibed with working on like player focused gameplay things. So like working on combat, working on some of the like UI stuff, working on like player movement and player controls, and Unreal was like a really good environment to do that because the Unreal scripting language, the Blueprints language, is really good for doing like quick and dirty gameplay prototypes. So it's really fun to experiment in, and you don't even have to be that good of a coder to use Blueprints. You can, if you got the general idea of how the general overview of how code works, you can run Blueprints just fine. And you can make just crazy cool things in there. And then once you have something that you like, you can take that and make like a really refined, awesome version of it in code, in like C++ code, which is what I started doing. It took a while to find like a focus, like a discipline that I was like, this is what I want to do. This is like what I love. But once you get there, like it makes working on projects so much more fun and so much more like effortless, I guess. Because you're doing something that you love, like it's like, or that like really excites you, and you just like want to keep working on it, which is awesome. It's a good feeling to get. So
You mentioned that you were working within the Unreal Engine. Do you have any advice for someone who's maybe trying to get into game development? They're starting that for the first time. I know there's a pretty tough learning curve for developing a skill set in that. What were some of the tricks that kind of helped you learn or pick up the Unreal Engine?
yeah, so my advice first is Unreal like you can do a lot of stuff in Unreal without C++, but it helps a lot to know C++, to know at least kind of fundamentals of C++ going in. Um, so that's kind of my advice. Like learn, like if you already know C++, awesome. If you can't, just learn some of the fundamentals, work on a couple of small things there, because that'll help you a lot with kind of opening up your possibilities of things that you can do within Blueprints. Otherwise, I pretty much taught myself for the first project that we did. All the stuff for there wasn't like an Unreal class or a professor who taught us Unreal at Digipen. We were kind of expected to learn it on our own. So what I did is I just found every official and like a good majority of unofficial like tutorials that I could find online and just started doing them like, every night, just like working through some tutorials, and like even if it was just like following step by step wiring up Blueprints exactly how they did it in a tutorial, and seeing how it works, like that's really really helpful the bigger to kind of wrap your head around the systems of Unreal, because it is daunting. It is a huge engine with tons of stuff, but if you can kind of just work in it a little bit every day in these guided things, you start to get a lot more comfortable working with things, and you start to feel like you can experiment and maybe branch out from what these things are, what the tutorials are teaching you. Yeah, and then it's just practice.
Starting to work now professionally in these teams. Were there a number of teams that you were applying to for internships? What did that process look like?
So my internship at Epic was last summer, summer 2019. That was after my fourth year at Digipen, but I was coming back for an additional semester in my fifth year just to finish things up. I started applying to a lot of internships at that time, just trying to get my name out there as much as I could. And I'd gone to GDC that past spring and tried to like network and stuff. So let me kind of back up. It takes a lot of networking. Sometimes it can take a lot of networking to get your name out there, but also just like apply to anything that looks interesting, looks like something you feel like you'd be good at, and just talk to people. Like even if you apply to something and you don't end up like loving that position, you talk to the recruiter and you don't end up loving that position, you've made a connection with that recruiter, because maybe they'll find something later down the line and feel like, I know a guy for that, I know somebody who can do that. So yeah, when you're out there, just talk to everybody you can, apply to everything you can. But with Epic, I applied for I think two positions at Epic. And then I also had a connection with one of my professors who I was close with. She ended up having a connection with the recruiter, and she ended up passing my name along to the recruiter, saying like, "Hey, this person's like pretty good. Like, you should talk to them." The recruiter reached out pretty quickly after that. And then I started the interview process. First, I got a test, which was like a gameplay test, which featured like coding questions, kind of basic code knowledge, pointers, hash tables, and then also a couple of small like essay things about gameplay, like gameplay features that you really liked from the past year, things that you didn't like, kind of why, elaborating on trying to kind of analytically look at gameplay things and just prove that you can kind of think about them from more of from beyond a surface level. Um, so after I turned that test in, I had a phone interview with two teams, the UI team and the gameplay team, which was a Google Hangouts interview, video call, and that was about hour and a half um, interview where they asked me about past projects at Digipen, a lot about my Unreal experience, a lot about problems that I faced in Unreal, how I overcame them, things that I learned. And then there were also some technical questions, some like 3D math questions, stuff about like when you would use cross product, resolving like 3D space collision, and then also some light coding problems, as much as you can do over like a Google Hangouts interview. Those are always tough for like 3D math and coding problems. Um, yeah, but then shortly after that video interview, I got a message that the gameplay team really liked me, and they gave me an offer. So then that summer I was a gameplay programming intern on Fortnite, which was pretty sweet. It was an awesome internship. So the best piece of advice I ever got for coding interviews is buy this book or a book like this, the Cracking the Coding interview book, and I keep it by my desk. So for those of you who don't know, one of the most common things that you'll run into during interviews is whiteboard interviews, which are very scary at first, but it's just writing code and doing problems on whiteboards in front of interviewers, and they can be small problems or they can be hour and a half problems where you're writing out problems. And this book is a really, really good resource for prepping for that. It's called Cracking the Coding Interview. I don't know if there's a newer edition, but this is the one I got, and I studied from that a lot. But just learning the process of how to approach a whiteboard problem and how to break it down into steps and how to kind of take it, how to keep moving through it, even if you feel like you're getting a little stuck or things like that, is really helpful. It really kind of calms your nerves, because it is pretty nerve-wracking, like doing this coding interview and on a whiteboard, and then you feel like you're stuck or you don't know what to do next. It can be like really scary. But if you just kind of take a deep breath, work through some of the steps of how to do that, and just kind of remember what you practice. Keep talking, keep writing things. Like your interviewer is there too because they want to hire you. So if they can kind of help you or talk you through it, they really just want to learn like how you think. So for like specific questions, interview questions, for like gameplay specific ones, I in every like gameplay interview I've ever done, they always ask me about mechanics or things that I've run into like recently in games that I liked and why, and what I didn't like and why. And I think what they're looking for there is that you kind of think about gameplay systems and mechanics beyond just like a normal player level, just thinking, oh, that's cool, or oh, this feels good, to like, why does it feel good? Like, what's good about it? Like, what makes this polished, or what makes this interesting or unique? So the one I always use is the God of War Leviathan throwing axe. I thought God of War is like so cool.
Right on, man.
Yeah, and I talked about I always talk about how I tried as hard as I could to break that mechanic, to try to specifically in God of War you throw an axe and you can recall it back and it's super satisfying. But I was like, there's got to be a way that I can make this do something that it's not supposed to, or do something weird. And just like I remember just like throwing it any way I could, throwing as far as I could, turning around, trying to do like crazy 360 moves with it, um, and I talk about that kind of experimenting I did with it, and like the things that I observed in it, and like kind of quirks of the system, and things that worked really well, and any like hitches that I did see or things like that. And I think that's they seem to really like that, and the feedback that I got, that I could look at a system like that I liked, and find out kind of why I liked it, why it worked, situations where it maybe didn't work as well, improvements I would have done. And then on the flip side, mechanics that you maybe didn't like, and the tough part of that is mechanics that you didn't like from games that you do
Right.
like. That's always kind of a caveat they throw in. And so just being able to criticize something beyond just saying it's bad or it feels bad, and saying like, oh, no, why is it this way? Like, what were they intending to do here, and why did it maybe fail in your eyes, or what would you do to improve it? Things like that. So those are always good for like gameplay specific
Do you
questions.
do you have a go-to bad mechanic?
Um, so the one I did recently, I've been playing Control a lot, and I really the Remedy game Control, and
Me too. Yeah, I
I
was just playing it.
that game is great, but I was getting so frustrated like 2 days beforehand with the levitating mechanic. It was taking me really long time to get used to kind of the controls of how it like activated and deactivated. Believe it's like a double button press if you're on the ground and you start levitating. But if you're in the air and you do it, you just kind of float down. And there was one specific kind of boss fight that was causing me a lot of problems with this levitating mechanic. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And so I talked about, this isn't necessarily a bad gameplay mechanic, but it's one that's really frustrating me, and one that's I'm having a hard time with. And this is kind of why I think that is, and why as a player. But and then talking about like, this is what I think from the developer side, like what they were intending for this, and what they wanted, and maybe where that's working and where that maybe isn't working, and stuff like that. So it's been a little while, so I don't remember kind of my exact whole spiel on that, but that was my kind of go to at that point.
Let's talk about when you started the job now. You're working at Epic. I'd love to hear about how it was different working in a professional environment making games versus what it was like making games with your student teams.
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing that I kind of experienced there was just being like overwhelmed, which it's because it's a big studio of these like amazing developers and stuff, and they're always moving at kind of a million miles an hour, always working on the next best thing, these crazy things, and the code base was this kind of massive project that I had to wrap my head around, like how to find things, and how to like work their source control, and how to do all sorts of stuff. So it's overwhelming, but it's also like really exciting. It's cool like being out of school and finally being able to contribute to like a real project. And everyone there is super at Epic was super helpful, and If I had ever had any questions or things that I was stuck on, like I had no shortage of people I could talk to who could help me there. But yeah, so it's overwhelming, but it's they really kind of did a good job onboarding me with like smaller tasks, bugs, things like that, and then kind of slowly ramping up to bigger projects once they felt that I felt that they felt I could handle, and letting me kind of focus on specific like categories of like gameplay or systems or things like that. um, yeah, so so it's overwhelming at first, but just kind of stick with it, ask tons of questions, like don't be scared, you're there for a reason, they want you there. Like that's always something I was reminding myself, like they want me here, like they want me here just as much as I want to be here, so I'm going to do like a really good job. I'm going to do the best I can every day, things like that. So yeah,
Right
that's
on.
yeah, for sure.
So you were one of the lucky few who made it through the application process. You got the job. I'd love to hear from you. What is some maybe common mistakes that you see other applicants making? What's kind of something that they could be doing just a little bit differently to actually land that job?
Yeah, so I think the biggest one is just like having good like communication skills. Like if you can be if you're an introvert or things like that, it can be hard. But just being able to talk about yourself in a positive way. It always feels weird. It always feels like bragging. But they want to know about you. Like so, talking about things in like I terms. Like if you have a project that was like a big group thing or something, they want to know what you did, not necessarily what the project did. They want to know these are the things that I did on the team. This is why it was important. This is why it worked. These are the problems I ran into. This is how I fixed them, kind of things like that. And then also like touching on how you work with a team. Then beyond that, like you can talk about like how you solved problems with other people, how like you faced adversity or faced like a time limit that you had, and how you delegated your time, or how you were a leader. If you took on any sort of leadership roles in your projects, they want to know about that, and what kinds of things you did as a leader. So that's probably the biggest. That's a big thing that I was been kind of told through my practicing and going through school and getting ready for interviews is I used to talk a lot in we's, like we did this project did was this thing, it ended up doing these things, and I'm like no, what did you do? Like
Hmm.
I think that's a big one. Yeah, and then that's I think that's a big one for just specific interviews. um Also just just general things, be friendly, courteous, like don't don't be like overly enthusiastic, like oh my god, I'm the biggest fan of this game like you guys are the amazing stuff, like they like trust me, they know, they want to know like about you, they like that you're enthusiastic about it, but your time there, they want to know like what why they should hire you, basically, why they should choose you. And yeah.
Some people would say that an internship is sort of like an extended job interview.
Mhm.
When you were taking this internship, what were some of the key things you think you could do in order to actually secure the job? So we talked about
Mhm.
advice for people getting the internship.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about somebody who's going to be an intern. What's something they could do? What should their focus be in order to make sure that they secure, the job offer at the end of the experience?
Yeah. So one thing that my mentor at the time, they assigned me a mentor developer there. He took me aside one day during lunch and was just kind of giving me advice of like, hey, you want to work here like full time? It seems like here's how you could probably do that. Here's the steps you could do. And the biggest thing he said that stuck with me is be needed. like make it so they need you there. Not that they necessarily like want you or like you, but that like they like you have something that they can't live without now. And one way to do that is to look for things that maybe aren't being neglected, or like no, maybe that's not the best word for it, but maybe things that aren't being focused on that could be, or things that could be improved but nobody else has the time for or is able to do or wants to, and becoming the guy who knows that system, or is making improvements that everybody's like, wow, this is, why didn't we think of this kind of things. So I think it's, yeah, I think it's looking for ways that you can make improvements that nobody's really focusing on right now or thinking of, beyond just like your normal tasks. So you'll probably be assigned tasks to work on, bugs to fix, projects to work on. But if while you're doing that, you notice something like, hey, that doesn't seem right, or that seems like we could do things better, like don't be afraid to like bring that up and be like, hey, I think this system could be done a little bit better, or this seems like it's causing a lot of problems. Can I go in and try to fix this kind of thing? Um, and then also focus on like it's good to like usually internships are pretty short, but in that time, if you can like kind of focus on some part of the game, uh, and become, I don't know, not necessarily an expert, but the guy for that, that's really good. So like during my internship, I focused on one kind of gameplay aspect of Fortnite, and worked on a lot of bugs in that, a big project in that, and another big project in that. So by the end, my producer was like, "Hey, you know this system really well. I'm going to give you all these bugs that we have that are in backlog from this system." And like, "Oh, this guy's working on a thing in this system. He has some questions. Can he come talk to you about it and like ask you to like pick your brain about this system and stuff like that?" And that's like a good way to be needed, is like being the guy who knows this thing inside and out. So yeah, that's kind of my advice, is do what you can to be needed. Yeah.
As that internship was winding down, what was your mindset?
Yeah. So I really loved working at Epic, and at that time, I would have loved to stay full time. Unfortunately, I had made the decision to return to school and finish my degree. I had about 12 credits left to finish, and it was like a point of pride for me to finish that degree. And I feel like it's also was going to be a benefit for me down the line for like future jobs and things like that. So Epic did not extend an offer to me to continue, on the basis that I was going to continue on with my schooling, and they weren't able to give me an offer for that reason. But they did welcome me to reapply, and the recruiters and coordinators for the internships were very, very helpful. They wanted me to send them updated resumes. They talked to members of teams that they could, who might be looking for people. They showed my resume to other partners and things like that. And I'm pretty sure they did that for most of like the interns that didn't accept full-time offers. And then during that semester that I was back at school finishing up, I did tons of applying to as many places as I could, and a lot of Epic positions. And I ended up applying and getting pretty far along in interviews for a different Epic position, not the same one I interned for. Um, and so, and I was able to talk about a lot about my internship experience and like in that, and got really good references from my past mentor and team leader and producer and things like that, because I tried to keep in touch with them, and like make a really good impression while I was there. So then I didn't end up accepting. I So let me back up. I interviewed a bunch of places. I got pretty far along in a few, including Epic, and I did end up receiving a full-time offer from Epic. Unfortunately, I didn't accept it because I decided to accept from another company, um, and a position that I feel is like a bit better fit for myself and my partner at the time. So, but yeah, like the internship really, really opened doors. Like really, really, it really opened doors for me, because it was like this great experience that I could talk about. I had really good connections from it. It was something I could put on my LinkedIn and my resume that got attention from companies like Tesla and Mojang and 343 and all these companies that were really like interested in talking to me now that I had this big name on it and this experience, and these really like positive connections that I had. So yeah, so like even if you don't get a full-time offer from an internship that you have, it's not the end of the world. That experience is gonna just blow up and give you open so many doors in the future. So yeah.
Would you say that applying as a full-time engineer is very different than applying as an intern? Are you facing harder interview questions? Is the process more involved, or what is it like comparatively?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a lot more. Um, so usually a lot. It feels like it's a lot longer process and a lot more involved, a lot more steps. So for Epic specifically, like for the internship, it was initial application, phone call with a recruiter, test, and then a phone interview, and then you're done. For a full time position, I actually had a special case where Epic did on site interviews at my school. And I ended up being able to sign up for one of those and got chosen for one of those. So I did an on site interview with the team lead of the team that I was looking to join. And then after that, they flew me out to their headquarters for a full day of interviews at the Epic headquarters, which included interviews with a bunch of members of the team, multiple whiteboard sessions, bunch of math questions and whiteboarding, lots of talk about experience, a lunch interview. So it's a lot more involved. And then that process uh, after the interviews took a lot longer because there's a lot more approval that goes into hiring a full-time person than an intern. So yeah, so I had during my interview, kind of my whole job search, I had multiple on-site interviews where I flew to different states to interview with people. I had a lot of Google Hangouts, tons of phone calls, lots of whiteboarding. So it's more intense, and it's yeah, things take longer. So, but um, the internship interview was like a good kind of primer for like what to expect when talking to a recruiter, talking to team members, doing a take home test, things like that. So they're similar, but it's just kind of full time is kind of bigger usually.
Okay. I'm interested to know what may have been. I'm interested to know what may be something that you learned while on the job that you initially found unintuitive.
Yeah. So I guess let me think about that for a moment. So I learned definitely on the job the what's the word I'm looking for, the the necessity of code reviews on big projects. At Digipen, on smaller projects, you could kind of get away with not necessarily reviewing all of the code that you're sending in. Like if it's a small change for a 4 person team or something like that, we would still do code reviews for big new systems that were coming in or changes or things like that if we had questions. But on a massive project, like a Fortnite sized project, so many parts are interwoven, so many people working on something, you have to have people checking your code to see, you have to have people looking at it and making sure it makes sense and that you're not submitting weird or slow or broken code to this thing. And you'd be surprised how many times you're like, yeah, this works, this is great code, and then you go to a code review and they're like, why are you doing that? What is this, what is this here? This is going to cause problems, or oh, you forgot this check that's going to cause a crash if this happens, or things like that. And it's it's a little daunting, and sometimes it's a little embarrassing because you're like, oh, I did it dumb, but that's what it's there for. It's there to catch dumb things before they happen. And then a lot of what I learned was just like technical things, things that and kind of um, productivity things, a lot of how to use the tools way better than I had been using Visual Studio, Unreal, Perforce, things like that. How to use those way more efficiently, making sure that I'm commenting in a way that's beneficial to a project of this scale. Working on networking for the first time, and how that whole process works and how it works on a game of a massive scale, and things like that. And also working with like a producer of like a big project and working on Jira lists that are bigger than just things that you assign yourself, because you need to keep track of things, task tracking stuff. Um, so it's a lot of making sure that you have it, that you're not um, that you're flushing out any bad habits that you may have come in with, and it's really just really observe the people around you and how they work and how they um, the code that they're producing and how they communicate and stuff, and try to emulate that, and leave any kind of baggage or bad habits that you have at the door. I did make a couple of mistakes along the way though. Like one of them was I ended up reusing a lot of code for part of the project that really could have been refactored in a much better way. And that was some of the feedback that I got. They were like, hey, this is working really well, but looking back, there's a lot of code that like could have been redone instead of just copied. And so I kind of internalized that, and I looked back and made improvements, like went back and made improvements on what I had done. Like instead of just taking a system that I knew worked and tweaking it, kind of figuring out how I can make it my own, how I can make it better for the project that I'm working on. And it's scary to like make your own thing at first, but and not just like take ideas that work and tweak them, or incremental changes, but it really is for the better to like kind of make things that are to refactor where you can, and to not reuse code when it's like not necessarily helpful. Like try to make things that work for like what you're doing really well.
What would you say was the hardest part about your job?
The hardest part is for Fortnite specifically, I think it's the deadlines. Fortnite releases new content every week, and it can be a lot. I never felt like pressure to work overtime or crunch or anything like that, but it is something you have to keep in your mind. Like you have to remember, like, this needs to be done at this time, so I need to be working efficiently. I need to be managing my time. I need to I can't just sit here and be stuck on something. If something's causing me a problem, I need to ask and I need to get it moving, basically. And that's different from like a school project where you kind of set your own goals, and there's like end date at the end of the semester that you have to meet, but you kind of are able to get in features when they're done and things like that. It's like there's a whole studio of people depending on you to do things sometimes. So just being conscious of deadlines and being really good at managing your time and things like that. That was like kind of a big wake up call, kind of an eye opening thing.
What would you say was the best part of working at Epic as an intern?
I think I learned new things every day, and I feel coming out there, I am like an exponentially better developer than I was going in. The people there, the developers there, are incredible. Like they're all like these amazing veterans of the industry.
On that note, what would you say is some advice you were given career-wise that has stuck with you? Maybe advice or a mantra, something that's helped you.
Yeah, there's one of the biggest things that sticks with me is remembering that the game industry is much smaller than it appears. Everybody really knows everybody, or has connections to like every company. Within a studio, people have connections to nearly every company. So don't burn bridges. Like don't be a dick to people. Like be nice, be someone that people like to hang around, be someone that people like to work with, because they'll talk to each other. One thing is, don't be afraid to. This is a terrible phrase, but it's one that's used all the time. Is when you're working on a project, don't be afraid to have to kill your baby, basically, if it's not something that's progressing, or it's not something that the project needs, or it's like just not working out. Like you can get really attached to a system you've been working on for days and days or weeks or months even, and if it gets cut, it can feel like you can take it personally, but you just gotta learn to let go and move on to the next thing. Like yeah, don't be afraid to shelve that big project, or if it's not going to work out, just like be honest with yourself and your team and be like, hey, this isn't going to work out how we want it. How better can we use our time here? Things like that. If you find something that people latch onto, something that's fun, even if it's not like your core mechanic or what you're focusing on, and you're like developing something, like laser focus on that. If you're developing a kart racer or something, and people are like, but wait, I really like this part of the game where I get to run around and like sabotage other people's carts or something, I don't know, like be like, oh wait, that we should expand that, focus on that, because that's what people really love. Like, yeah, so
Well, thank you, Jesse, for your time. I really appreciate you chatting with us today.
yeah, thank you for talking to me. This was really fun. I hope something I said in my gibberish helped.
Thanks.
So thank you so much.
It was a pleasure chatting with Jesse. Here are some of the key takeaways I left the conversation with. The first was that the big difference between the interns who come and then never come back, and then the interns who actually get the offer, is those latter people make themselves needed. And that's sort of the mantra. It's be needed. Find a niche, find a role, find a dependency that the team can build on your skill set, and then make it so that they can't imagine life without you. That was one of the key things I think that he said sets apart the people who get the job versus those who don't. The next is great communication is one of the biggest ways that prospective candidates fail. It seems like these people are really good at coding, but they're just not great at communicating their ideas. And so I think that's something that as engineers, we always find ourselves needing to practice, myself included. But great communication skills and how to practice those. I guess that's kind of my next interest. We have to explore that, how we can really dive into practicing our communication skills. The next thing was the biggest difference between his student projects and the stuff that he got on the job. He spoke about how Epic was really overwhelming in some ways, and it seemed that a lot of that came from the factor that there was a lot of people working on the source code at Epic. So it seems like these teams are much larger than anything he'd experienced in student projects. And so if you're a student who's considering working in this like huge AAA environment, maybe you can pursue opportunities that will allow you to engage with multiple code contributors. Something like not using source control on a student project is kind of it's very typical, right? That we hear this kind of common pitfall for students. And I think by throwing students into environments where they have to work with large code bases, work with large development teams, it's going to help them build those skills. The next is that the hardest part of working at Epic is deadlines and sort of making yourself a high efficiency individual. He talked a lot about workplace efficiency and this idea that to many degrees, it seems like Epic kind of expects you to be an independent contributor. It seemed like he was very much responsible for making sure he was getting his work done on time, unlike maybe a assignment where you have these checkpoints along the way in a university setting. So really trying to find ways to maximize your efficiency seems to be a key success factor in this job. And so it's something that we could explore on this channel. What sets the efficient engineers apart from those who are not? The next sort of warnings from Jesse were don't be a dick and don't be afraid to kill your babies. So the first one was, you have to be conscious that the industry is really small and you don't want to step on anybody's toes, right? And I've certainly done that, right? Because at the same time, people in the games industry can be just as sensitive as everybody else, right? So you got to be understanding that sometimes you're going to say something and someone's going to, get a visceral reaction to that. So I think the way in which you engage in that and, you apologize at the right time, you set the track record however you need to do it, I think that's going to make a big difference because there's a big difference between making a mistake, right, and being a dick, right? And what he's saying here is your reputation is going to precede you, right? And so you need to be really careful about that just because it is a small pond. The other mention here was not being afraid to kill your babies. We've certainly seen that, right, in the games industry as people get super attached to this like one idea they have. They don't want to let it go. This happened to me on a project very recently. And I just have to say that there's no greater advice, I think, than coming into a project, coming into a team as someone who's going to help the team. maybe even before helping yourself with your, getting your ideas across. You want to be a team player in that sense, right? All over Reddit, right? There's sort of this death of the idea guy. People don't really value that contributor if you can't work in a team. And then last thing there was chase the fun. This was kind of the mantra that he said when it came to his student projects. He often came in with this idea, right? Again, this idea guy, this kill your babies thing. He came in with an idea of what the game was going to be. And you know what he realized? Sometimes people would play the game and find the most engaging part was not even the part he expected was going to be that fun. And so what he's saying is that if you discover that there's this sort of hidden gem, it turns out that, this part of the game you didn't think would be that interesting turns out to be an amazing, interesting thing for most players, then dive into it. Embrace that and chase the fun. Because the truth is it's going to be a lot harder to find something that's fun than it is to, find something that's working, so to speak, right? And that's why prototypes are never sacred, right? The whole point is just to get to the fun part and build a game on top of that rather than build some really beautiful code that leads to a product that's not very engaging. So those are my takeaways from Jesse's talk. If you took away something different, something I missed, please put it in the comment section so I can review that and learn from it as well, right? Because we're all students here. And I really appreciate your viewership. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like or consider hitting that subscribe button so I can join you in the next one and we can meet new people and learn new things. Thanks.